In this set of exercises, we're going to continue working on our dynamic posture and dynamic fluid walking. And we're also going to work on how to feel hip power. In our previous exercise set, we were working on our hip flexion techniques. And in this exercise set, we're going to be working on our hip extension techniques. As I walk you through these exercises, I'm going to help you realize how to connect your upper body with your lower body, your waist core muscles with your hip muscles. And so begin with your feet wide apart, and we're going to shift from side to side, and we're going to punch out with the fist on the side we are shifting the weight towards, and then punch out on the other side as we shift in that direction. The arm action is reflecting the rotation from the upper waist muscles. Forward on the left, forward on the right. As we shift from side to side, we're using hip extension, pushing with the glutes on the left, pushing with the glutes on the right. Coordinating that with the upper waist rotation. When we do it in this manner, there should be no change in elevation. Your lower abs are also going to be active, rotating towards the side where we are shifting. Lower abs, or you can use your belly button as a stand-in, turning towards the left, turning towards the right. As we do this shift, the upper waist and the lower waist are always going to be turning in opposite directions. I call this torsion, or it's twisting the waist muscles in opposite directions. Upper waist turning in the opposite direction from the lower waist. Feel the engagement the entire time. With every motion we do when we're walking or standing, the core waist muscles have to coordinate with our hip muscles to keep stable, fluid movement with dynamic posture. So this is the first exercise in this set. In the walking code, which these core patterns are part of, which are also defined in Tai Chi with the 8 energies, this shift is called reach. Hip extension with torsional rotation on the side opposite of the hip extension. In Tai Chi, this energy would be called pluck. Now for the second exercise, we're going to move from this position up into a triangle with the spine in the center and the 2 legs wide apart. In this position, we are going to begin here, and we're going to drop and then go across again, and then go up to the center and then drop. And I'll explain this in a moment after you've done it for a bit. We are keeping our core muscles constantly engaged throughout the motion. We will reach a stopping position only when the core actions find that equilibrium position where the movements get us to a final position, but we continue the engagement. Even though I've stopped moving, I'm still reaching forward from the upper waist, I'm still turning backward from the lower waist, and I'm still extending from the hip. I call this an equilibrium position where the movement reaches a natural stopping point. This is what is meant by the essential principle in Tai Chi, that movement and stillness are present at the same time. Now that you've probably gotten this one, we're going to explain the core movement Now I am turning my upper waist and lower waist, lower abs and upper abs, in the same direction as the extending hip. So I'm extending my left hip, and upper and lower waist are turning to the left, even though you can't see the rotation. This is why it's very difficult sometimes to understand what our core is doing, because of the combination of all three elements working together do not always produce any visible rotation. So you can't see that I'm turning the upper and lower waist to the left off of that left hip extension. Now we're going to drop by turning the lower abs from left to right, and that moves me to this next position. As you do these exercises, we also need to understand that the knee actions, knee flexion, knee extension, and our ankle actions, dorsiflexion or plantar flexion, are going to be naturally coordinated with the core motions to keep vertical posture. So as I change this movement, lower abs going back to the right to create the reach position, the right knee is naturally going to flex in order to keep vertical posture. If I don't flex the right knee as I do that motion, it's going to throw me off balance. And so we have to let our knees and our ankles do what comes natural. You don't have to think about what they're doing. Just let them do their work naturally. What you should focus on is maintaining vertical posture. Now we're going to switch sides, pushing up to this position now with the core rotating to the right off of the extending right hip. Keep the fist engaged in a tight contraction, because that's going to help you feel the connection to that engagement of the core, the upper waist muscles. As I go forward on one side of the upper waist, I'm retracting the forward motion from the other side. This motion here is in the walking code called pulse. Upper and lower waist are turning towards the extending hip, clockwise towards the extending right hip. That is pulse. In Tai Chi, this would be called ward off. Now we're going to switch to a different motion so you can see a different core position. Back to the beginning, where we're going from reach, extending with the left hip, and reach, extending with the right hip, we're going to begin going as if we were going to go to reach, but instead of extending my left hip, I'm going to flex my left hip. And that's going to bring me to this center position here, which I call set. I now have torsional rotation on the right. My upper waist is turning forward on the right. My lower abs are turning back and to the right. But I have flexion of my left hip, meaning I'm kind of like trying to pull my left hip as if I was going to pull my leg up off the ground. That's what gets me to this position. If I change the hip flexion to hip extension, I continue to move across as I did with reach. So this transition is going to help you feel the difference between hip flexion and hip extension. That's the difference between these two motions. The moment of transition is going to be right when you get to the center position. To move across, you have to go from hip flexion to hip extension. Reach with extension of the left hip. Reach with extension of the right hip. Set with flexion of the left hip. Set with flexion of the right hip. So far, we've looked at 2 of the 4 core patterns that use hip extension: reach and pulse. Reach and pulse. Now we're going to go to a third pattern, which is going to be in the walking code termed reach back. Reach back is when we turn the upper and lower waist away from the extending hip. So we're going to transition from reach, and we're going to get to one side, and then I'm going to turn the upper waist on the opposite side. So forward on the side of the extending hip, and that's going to turn reach into a new movement, which I call reach back, and Tai Chi is called shoulder strike. And you can see why that may be in Tai Chi. It's a shoulder strike in that direction. Then we're going to go back to set, reach, and shoulder strike. So in shoulder strike or reach back, my upper and lower waist are turning to the left or counterclockwise as I'm extending my right hip. Set, reach, reach back. Set, reach, reach back. I call that movement reach back because if we're standing on one leg and I extend my hip and turn my upper and lower waist away from it, it causes the leg to reach back. So we can practice that motion as well. Reach back with the right hip. Reach back with the left hip. And let's go back to both feet on the ground. And then we have one more of the core patterns using hip extension, and that is going to be push. To do push, we're going to transition from our reach to set. So now I have my torsional rotation on the right, flexion of the left hip. Push is going to be extension of the hip on the same side as the torsional rotation, and that's going to give me this action. I have torsion on the right, hip extension on the right. And then we can set back in this position and then go back to our original movements. Now we're going to perform push on the other side from reach, 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 set, and push with the left hip. Settle back down and go back to reach, reach, set, push with the left hip. Now, because I want you to connect all of this with your walking technique, we're going to go from this static position that we're doing into a step. I'm going to move back so I can step forward as we're going from reach to reach to reach. We now have torsional rotation on the left. I'm now going to flex my right hip, which is going to turn reach into set. And from set, I'm going to lift off using flexion of my left hip, or I'm going to pull forward, and that's going to take me into a normal step. So practice that on both sides. Reach, hip extension to hip flexion, and then lift yourself forward into a forward step. From the side position, reach, set, lift. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm Dr. Todd Martin. I am a family medicine physician for the past 27 years. I'm also a dance instructor and a Tai Chi practitioner, and I have brought together these three disciplines in the walking code to teach you how to walk more fluidly, walk with more confidence, and walk with lower impact on your joints. I'll see you in the next one.